And could you all please ensure that your mobile phones are switched to silent? And councillors, please make sure you speak directly into the microphones. Members of the public, I would like to say that as a committee we do understand that matters under consideration tonight can be emotive. However, please be respectful of others in the gallery and indeed of the members discussing the applications. So, to move on to the main items of business, the minutes of the last meeting have been on the table for the last 30 minutes. Do I have your permission to sign them as a true record? Thank you very much. Amy, any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies from Councillors Dennis Lee and Stephen Reynolds. Councillor Nick Holder has advised that he's running slightly late today.
Thanks.
I also give Tom Martin's apologies, he's not able to be here.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Amy, any declarations of interest?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes. You, Chairman, Councillor David Else has declared a pecuniary interest in item B3, Step Cottage, and will leave the chamber while this item is considered. Councillor Paul Follows has also declared a non-pecuniary interest in item A1, as he's a member of Godalming Town Council and has met with residents and the County Councillor to discuss the application.
Thank you. Members, any other pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest you'd like to declare before we start the meeting? Okay. Thank you very much. Amy, any questions from members of the public or from members?
Thank you, Chairman. None received.
Thank you. Gemma, any relevant updates to government guidance or legislation since the last meeting?
No, Chairman.
Okay. While you've got your microphone on, would you like to present the performance against government targets for us, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Members will note that the Planning Services performance on the update sheet, you will see that we continue to perform well in terms of speed. In terms of quality, that is the number of appeals allowed by PINs, members will be aware that since the publication of the agenda, the Folly Hill appeal decision was issued to allow the appeal. It should not come as any great surprise to you that we have exceeded the government threshold for special measures in the last assessment period. Thankfully, the government published the final statistics prior to the Folly Hill appeal decision, so it didn't count. You will be aware that we have been updating the committee on this critical performance level for the last year. This should serve as a warning that decisions on major applications and avoiding further major appeals is critical, with the potential to impact this position. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Gemma. Is that Beth coming back in? No, sorry, I heard the door. Oh, yes, here she is. Yeah. Come and join us, Beth. So just a note that in the event of any site inspections being necessary as a result of consideration of the applications at this meeting, these will be held on Monday, the 11th of February, at a time to be agreed at the meeting. And the first item for consideration this evening is item A1, our reference WA/2018/1525, land-centred coordinates 496830146100 South East Binscombe in Godalming, and the proposal is for the erection of 21 dwellings and associated works with new access from Binscombe Lane. Thank you. And Gemma's going to introduce the application.
Thank you, Chairman. So the application site is shown edged in red on the screen and totals an area of 1.25 hectares. It is located to the south of Binscombe Lane, to the west of Green Lane, and to the north of Copside, which features existing residential development. The site comprises an area of agricultural land. The site is screened by existing trees and hedgerows. Immediately adjoining the site to the southeast is St Christopher's Cottage, a Grade 2 listed building. This is an aerial photograph of the site, which demonstrates the surrounding character of the area, areas of residential development to the east and south of the site, with open fields to the north and west. Public right-of-way footpath 1 lies to the south of the site, within a strip of land located between the site and Copside. This is shown in yellow on the screen. Under policy RE2 of the local plan, Part 1, the entire site has been removed from the greenbelt and area of great landscape value. The site is located within the plan outlined in red on your screen. The site has therefore been incorporated within the settlement of Godalming, and the presumption in favour of sustainable development applies. The scheme before members this evening relates to a full planning application, so there are no matters to be reserved for future approval. Full permission is sought for the erection of 21 dwellings. As the 30% policy requirement for this site would be equivalent to the provision of 6.3 affordable units, 6 units of affordable dwellings would be proposed, and a commuted sum for the remaining 0.3 units would be secured. The residential development would feature a mix of one-storey, 1.5-storey and 2-storey buildings, comprised of detached, semi-detached and terrace units. A children's play area is proposed to the north of the site, along with a perimeter exercise nature trail. Full details of these would be secured as part of the recommended condition 18 on pages 35 of the agenda report. The proposed scheme would provide new access to Binscombe Lane, located within a similar position to the existing access. The proposed access and visibility displays have been designed to meet principles set out in the Department for Transport Manuals for Streets. Swept path analysis has confirmed that the site could be accessed by refuse vehicles. The proposal involves links to footpath 1 to the south, which would allow future residents to safely access public transport and facilities. The proposal also seeks to secure surfacing improvements to public footpath 1. This would be secured by way of a Section 278 agreement. In terms of highway improvements, the proposal would provide for a virtual footway on Binscombe Lane, which includes an uncontrolled crossing area to the medical centre. This would also be secured by way of a Section 278 agreement and is conditioned as part of Condition 21, as shown as page 36 of the agenda report. The proposal would also provide for the provision of a new 30-mile-an-hour gateway at the junction of Binscombe Lane and Green Lane to indicate to drivers that a new 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. This would also be secured by way of a Section 278 agreement and is conditioned as part of Condition 22, shown on page 36 of the agenda report. The 6 affordable housing units have been identified with a red mark, as shown on the screen, and would comprise a mixture of affordable housing for rent and shared ownership. Officers have negotiated with the applicant to secure an acceptable tenure slip. Rented units can be for affordable rent or social rent. This will depend upon funding available to the registered provider to taking on the affordable units. Both rented tenures will be defined in the draft Section 106 agreement to allow for future flexibility. A financial contribution will be made in lieu of the remaining 0.3 units to make up the 30% policy compliancy. This sum was to be secured in the draft Section 106 agreement for the provision of off-site affordable housing within the borough. The cluster of affordable units are considered to be appropriately balanced with the market housing, and the locations also take into account the operational requirements of the registered providers and take into consideration the advice of the Council's housing enabling officers. Moving to parking, a total of 46 parking spaces would be provided as part of the scheme. 42 of these would be allocated for dwellings and are shown in red on the screen, and 4 would be allocated for visitors, which are shown in blue on the screen. This would accord with the Council's parking guidelines. The spaces would include a mixture of driveway spaces and car barns. In addition to vehicular parking, there would be shared cycle racks proposed for plots 3 and 4, which is the flatted development, and areas within private amenity spaces and garage would be used for cycle storage for the proposed dwellings. In terms of electric vehicle charging points, Condition 9 on page 32 of the agenda of the report seeks to secure fast charging electrical points for all units. To give members an idea of the style of housing materials to be used on site, the next few slides will show example of proposed design. Plots 3 and 4 comprise the affordable flatted development, and influence has been taken from surrounded buildings. The shape, form and architectural details are reminiscent of farm buildings, so as to maintain a rural approach to the hamlet of Binscombe. These are further examples of the design of the affordable housing, and the proposed materials would all be reflective of the Surrey vernacular. This is an example of the form and design of one of the detached market dwellings. And here is a further example of form and design of terrace market dwellings. The dwellings facing onto Binscombe Lane would have the appearance of organic farm buildings, varying in height from single-storey to 1.5-storey. Towards the rear of the site, the materials would turn into brick, reflecting the more urban residential development towards the south of the site. Just a couple of photographs now, just giving you an idea of the site. There's a photograph from the site from Binscombe Lane, looking towards the southwest of the site. Members will take note of the extent of the boundary treatments. And here is another one from Binscombe Lane, looking southeast into the site. Again, noting the well-treed boundaries. Matters of principal and technical opinion and matters of judgment are displayed on the slides. The proposed development fall within the settlement area of Godalming, Officers are of the opinion that the proposal would provide dwellings in a sustainable location and would deliver 30% of affordable dwellings, which would contribute towards the housing needs. The delivery of housing in a settlement area, given the wider constraints that apply to the borough, would comprise a significant social benefit for this development. It would also be consistent with the NPPF's focus on housing delivery. There would be economic gains from sources including construction-based employment and activity and spending from future occupiers of the site. The proposal is considered to function well within the surrounding area, incorporating amenity and play space within its layout and a high-quality architectural design. All residential units would record with the technical standards, which would be of significant merit. In combination with the amenity space, officers are of the view that a good standard of accommodation would be provided. The County Highway Authority is satisfied the development can be accessed in a safe manner, and subject to highway improvements, which have been referred to throughout this presentation, a scheme could be provided without prejudice to the highway safety or capacity. Whilst noting that the proposal would inevitably change the visual appearance of the otherwise open and development-free site, in officers' opinion, the development would relate visually to existing residential development in the locale. Overall, officers considered that the proposal would provide for an acceptable profile of homes to serve the community. Whilst the proposal would result in the loss of some Grade 3 agricultural land, it is considered that there is a strong case for the development of this site and the delivery of housing, which overrides the need to protect the land in this instance. In terms of heritage considerations, the conclusions of officers is that while it's acknowledged that the proposal will result in less than substantial harm to the significance of the designated heritage assets comprising the conservation area, this identified harm is outweighed by the public benefits of the proposal. Moving to the update, members will note the procedural matter. This additional recommendation seeks to cover off the highly unlikely eventuality that issuing of any decision occurs after the 1st of March 2019, which triggers the implementation of SIL. This is not likely, as the intention is that the legal agreement and the decision would be issued shortly after, if permission is granted tonight. However, in the unexpected event this does happen, this additional recommendation would avoid any repetition and further unnecessary committee time on matters that technically have already been decided. The adjustment of payments from Section 106 to SIL will be made by officers in accordance with the SIL recommendation. The remainder of the update provides responses to questions raised by members and third parties prior to the publication of the agenda report. Finally, the update refers to amendments to conditions 1, 4 and 17 in order to provide clarity. Therefore, moving to the revised recommendations, Recommendation A is that subject to conditions 1 to 8, 10 to 16 and 19 to 26 as set out on pages 29 to 38 of the agenda report, and the agreement of an appropriate legal agreement within 6 months of the committee resolution and amended conditions 1, 4 and 17 as set out in the update report, permission be granted. The recommendation is to remain as set out on recommendation B is to remain as set out on page 7 of the agenda report. And recommendation C is that if formal planning decision in respect to recommendation A is issued on the 1st of March 2019 or thereafter, then the head of planning be authorised to charge SIL in accordance with the council approved SIL charging schedule and revise section 106 payments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Gemma. Should you have said recommendation B, this recommendation to remain as set out on page 41 of the agenda? Thank you very much. Good evening, Councillor Holder. Nice to have you with us. As you'll be well aware, you may contribute to the discussion on this application, but may not vote as you missed the beginning of the presentation. Thank you. This application is subject to public speaking, and I would first invite Stephen Clark to speak on behalf of the objectors. Mr. Clark. Good evening, sir. I understand the procedure has been explained to you, and you have 4 minutes from when you start speaking. Thank you.
This site at Binscombe was until recently within the Greenbelt, part of the AGLV, and has a distinctly rural character. I urge members to consider the strength of local opposition and to consider carefully the large number of passionate and heartfelt written objections. There have been no individual letters of support. Binscombe is a medieval hamlet, first recorded in 1227. The heart of the village comprises 25 dwellings, 9 of which are listed, and many of which are 16th century in date. If allowed, this development of 21 units would increase this number by 84%. I have here a Waverley Conservative Group pre-election press release of 2015 that states, "We pledge to keep existing Greenbelt boundaries." It is scandalous that councillors did not keep to this promise, and we would not be here discussing this inappropriate development if they had. The latest ONS figures show a much lower projected household growth, and the number of planned homes in Waverley should be reduced. Proof of falling demand is the nearby Greensand Park development in Farncombe, where only 80% is sold, leaving a large number of units on this site unoccupied well over a year since completion. The Binscombe site would be accessed by a dangerous single-track country lane, lacking any footpath for over 200 metres. It is bordered on both sides by ancient trees and hedgerows, so widening would be damaging to the environment and alter the rural character permanently. Pedestrians are already severely at risk in the village, and any increase in traffic would obviously increase this risk. The site lies within Compton Marsh, and unsurprisingly, flooding is common. This is confirmed by the archaeological report that clearly states many of the trenches dug could not be examined, as they immediately filled with water, even at depths of less than 45 centimetres. Godalming Trust have objected, Surrey Hills have objected, stating this field is essential to the integrity of the adjoining conservation area. CPRE have objected, and Waverley's conservation officer has stated that any development on this site will have a harmful impact and diminish the significance of listed buildings nearby. Last October, Godalming Town Council unanimously objected because the application lacked environmental considerations and the effect on listed buildings, other heritage assets nearby, and the unique character of the village had not been adequately considered. In 2017, the residents were promised in writing by the council leader, Julia Potts, a heritage assessment, because even she realised the sensitivity of the site. However, what we were given was a statement commissioned by the developers, which, despite acknowledging the harm the new estate would cause to a heritage asset, is biased in favour of development and does not convey the importance of this ancient part of Surrey. Surely an independent, impartial assessment for such a sensitive site was the very least we could expect. The revised NPPF strengthens protection in law of heritage assets, and even the council's own website clearly acknowledges an obligation to conserve and enhance conservation areas that may be affected by a proposal. This is a core planning principle, and I'm astonished that the acknowledged harm arising from development should be given so little weight in the planning balance. The site has listed houses on 3 sides and is within 30 metres of the Binscombe conservation area, about the width of this room. Can any councillor tell me, with hand on heart, that this development will not have an adverse effect on the adjacent Binscombe conservation area and its setting? I appreciate this is David versus Goliath, but it seems Waverley Borough Council are willing to wade through at any cost inappropriate developments without due regard to either process or the latest legislation. In conclusion, the adverse impact on developing land adjacent to protected heritage assets and the lack of an independent assessment clearly outweighs such modest housing benefit. It also renders the council's approach unlawful, being a clear failure to have regard to material planning considerations. I would remind members they have an obligation in law to protect the historic environment for future generations, and it would be a tragedy if this application were approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. I now invite Jeff Armstrong, the agent, to speak in support of the application.
Thank you, Chairman. Oakford Homes are an award-winning private house builder who specialise in the delivery of high-quality homes of a bespoke nature. As a company, they take pride in the attention to detail when delivering new residential developments. The proposal at Binscombe is typical of the company's approach in this respect. The application site was removed from the Greenbelt, as your officer explained earlier, and the area of great landscape value by the local plan, Part 1, to allow the site to come forward for housing, strongly endorsed by the local plan inspector. As a result, it now falls within the settlement boundary of Godalming and represents a rare opportunity for residential development within the borough. The proposal before members is the result of substantial engagement with officers and the public alike, stretching from May 2017, when the first officer meeting took place, to August 2018, when the application was submitted. During this period, we kept in constant contact with Waverley's planning, design, heritage and housing officers, as well as Surrey County Council's housing officers. The application was only submitted when all elements of the scheme had been agreed with these relevant officers. The scheme has also taken into account all of the physical constraints of the site, investigated within a large suite of technical documents submitted as part of the application. It is now agreed by your officers that the proposal is of a high-quality design and is well related in size, scale and character to its surrounding. In particular, the scheme includes a low-density landscape-led development that is entirely in keeping with the character of the area, a mix of homes weighted towards smaller family units that directly accords with the needs of the emerging Godalming neighbourhood plan, 6 much-needed affordable housing units, as well as additional financial contribution towards off-site contribution, high level of design that reflects the character of Binscombe, generous level of open space on site that exceeds policy requirement and contributions as well to off-site, significant enhancements to the wider footpath network towards Farncombe and to the local highway network, resulting in an increased highway safety. The full programme of public consultation included an exhibition at the local church hall in March 2018 and one-to-one meetings with the closest neighbours to the site, which included the residents of St Christopher's Cottage, Stoneacre and Binscombe Farmhouse. Each meeting resulted in specific amendments to the scheme shaped by the feedback we received. These specific concerns raised by direct neighbours to the site saw special attention to the provision of boundary screening, the proposed drainage scheme, and in particular the design of both vehicular and pedestrian accesses. All influences to date have gone into the scheme which has been presented to you today. In particular, the number of houses proposed on the site decreased significantly during this process due to being a design-led scheme, from the original Schlar recommendation of 35 to the current 21. In respect of other key points raised by residents, the proposal will actually improve local pedestrian and highway safety. It will see the speed limit along Binscombe reduced to 30 miles an hour, will provide enhanced footpath links between the village and Green Lane, and will see the introduction of a continuous virtual footpath along Binscombe Lane towards Farncombe. The location, design and construction of the access have all been informed by detailed discussion with officers and the recommendations of the applicant's own consultants. The scheme has been diligently designed in such a way that it complements the character and scale of the buildings within the nearby Binscombe Conservation Area. Whilst the loss of open space will have a minimal impact on the setting of the conservation area, this is limited and balanced by the high quality of the design. Contrary to a number of public comments, there is a clear need for smaller houses and affordable houses, and particularly in Waverley, needs met by our client's proposal. These needs are identified both within the Godalming neighbourhood plan as well as in the recent appeal decisions. The suitability of the drainage strategy has been confirmed following discussions between the applicant and the lead flood authority, and due to better maintenance of the local network, it is now a fact that it will improve the local drainage system.
Could you sum up, please, Mr Armstrong?
I therefore request that members support the officer's recommendation for much needed new housing in Binscombe and Waverley as a whole, and approve this application so that these homes can come forward in the next 18 months. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Follows.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you, officers, for answering many of the questions that I sent in advance, and also those sent to me by residents. I have a few others, one of which I apologise for. I should have asked you in advance. Would you mind at some point during the session humouring me and just working out the SIL for this relative to its 106? The 106 heads of terms is £109,606.50. If at some point during the session you could have a stab at the SIL, I meant to ask you before, and I apologise, that one's on me. Just going into a couple of the other issues on this, the affordable housing. One of the issues I've always had with these commuted sums is, first off, understanding that it actually results in an affordable dwelling going somewhere, which is something that we still haven't seen on a few occasions. But looking at the 0.3 of a dwelling that they have to contribute, that's £59,033 for that 0.3. My math is not my absolute strong point, but I think that works out that one dwelling, therefore, is £196,776. Now, in a similar application recently, no officer or member or chair would put a figure on how much an affordable house was. And yet, of course, we effectively do that by giving a commuted sum. Can somebody show me an affordable house, a house that's £196,000 in Godalming somewhere that actually somebody can buy? Because to me, this doesn't feel like enough of a contribution, and I'd just like to understand how that money is calculated. Just going on to prematurity, considering that we asked the public to consult on sites such as this, in fact, including this in LPP2, I continue the argument from last week that actually giving planning permission to sites that have not yet had consultation under LPP2 is absolutely premature and therefore should be inadmissible until they've had their consultation. The same argument again from last week that the fact is it's going to be a few weeks before SIL, and I suspect the answer will be that it's going to get far less infrastructure contributions than it should do. I'm also a member of Godalming Town Council. I stand by absolutely every single one of the objections that were raised at that point. I voted for those objections. I stand by them now. I think that its proximity to the conservation area is absolutely material, as the objector has made clear. I believe that the highways issues are material, and I'd also like to just query why there seems to be no highways contributions in the 106, considering that there were things suggested that were being done. So where are those coming from in terms of funding? So for all of those reasons, unless there are significant objections, significant reasons to vote for this, and I'm particularly looking at the other 5 members of Godalming Town Council here as well, if there are significant reasons from them as to why I should be voting for this, my current mindset is to oppose. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wheatley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to say that we were extremely disappointed when, to get the local plan through, the Greenbelt bit had to be massaged, so we lost this field out of the Greenbelt. It is, from our point of view, almost a tragedy because Binscombe has its own charm and heritage, and it is an enormous shame that is about to be dwarfed, no matter how sensitively, by a would-be development. And just to put actually on the other side, apparently, as it says in our follow-up sheet, there are only 2 properties remaining up at the Furs Lane development. But that road is very dangerous. I know that they're doing as we asked, to have extra footpaths up the other end. People will have to walk to the junior school, a mighty long walk to any secondary school. Hopefully the footpath does lead its way to the medical centre. We do not want anybody walking on that road. There are no pavements, there's nowhere to hide. Even if we're delivering, we take our lives in our hands. It is a very dangerous area and was not intended to be residential. I probably have not said anything that is really a planning reason, but I'm just very sorry that this has had to come forward.
Thank you. Councillor Hunter.
As I'm also the ward councillor for this area, I think this plan is premature. This local plan is designed to last for 30 years. We can't expect to build all the houses in year 1. So I think it is very premature to come forward with this proposal. I'm also against, because of Binscombe Lane, there's a sharp bend, a blind bend, and this entrance is too near to this blind bend. It's dangerous. If they had to have an entrance, it should have been on the Copside side of the development. And we've had a lot of windfall houses that have come forward in this area, the manner that's been changed into houses. And so I think we have the housing numbers in the area, and I don't think this is necessary to build these houses at this point in time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I ask the officers to clarify the room sizes? In particular, are the affordable dwellings smaller than the market dwellings? And I have a second question separate. The objector stated that there were some formal objections. Those don't seem, I didn't quite catch the wording, but those don't seem to be listed in the agenda papers. So if you can clarify that, please.
Officers, would you like to respond to Councillor Follows and Councillor Bolton's questions, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I think we're sort of working still on the SIL figures, and I'm not sure if that's going to be straight away, I'm afraid. I think if looking to Councillor Bolton's question regarding the room sizes or the sizes of the units, I mean, page 4 of the update does actually give a table showing the proposed floor areas in respect to the national space standards, all of which exceed that. And the affordable housing units are really no different to the market in that respect. I'd be grateful if you could repeat the last of your questions, sorry, in terms of the objections.
Thank you, Councillor. I couldn't initially see the objectors listed in the documents, but I'm assured by some of my colleagues that there are. But there seem to be a number of outside objectors. Can you just clarify who and where they're listed?
Pages 11 and 12 give the statutory consultees.
Yes.
If that's what you're looking for.
No, because they have all no objection. And the objector who spoke said there were implied there were a number of objectors.
Are you talking about the representations from the neighbouring parties, so pages 12 to 13? There are 50 objections from neighbours have been received, raising objections on the following ground, and the following grounds are then listed in bullet points. And then there's talks about a separate submission from the CPRE on page 13,
Yes.
which goes over to page 14.
That's the only one.
Right, so there's one outside or body, the CPRE, and the town council, yes. Okay.
I think also in respect to one of Councillor Follow's questions in terms of the highways contribution, there's no securing of monetary contributions. All the highway improvement works will be secured under a Section 278 agreement between the Highway Authority and the developer, which is why there are no monetary obligations being sought under this current application. Thank you.
Are those money sought from the developer though when they are taken under a 278 agreement?
Yes.
I think Councillor Follows also had a question about the affordable homes, status of the affordable homes. Yeah.
Sorry, Chairman, if I could just come back on Councillor
Yes, of
Follows'
course.
question on how the money's calculated. It is just a formula, and it is a tried and tested formula that they use. So they put the figures in, and a figure comes out.
Two questions. For future reference, may I have a copy of that formula so I can understand myself how that works, and to understand whether what we are calling an affordable dwelling created out of commuted funds is actually going to make one dwelling in practice? And also, can I renew my request to see evidence that the commuted sums have resulted in affordable dwellings actually on the ground? Thank you.
Yes, I can pass on your request to our housing enabling team.
I would also say that there's a supplementary planning document currently under preparation that will deal with affordable housing and such calculations, and that will be coming out for consultation with all councillors fairly soon. Any other comments? Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. None of us like building houses, particularly in sensitive areas, and we'd really rather not do so. But we have to be very careful. I think we need to look very carefully at this planning application, and if we wish to turn it down, we need to have valid planning reasons so to do. Thus far, sadly, I have heard no valid reasons why we should turn this down, and were we to do so, it would go to appeal, and I'm sure would be won on appeal. Let me take some of the issues that are mentioned. Greenbelt. Well, None of us like eroding the green belt. However, a full local plan was gone through. The planning inspector required us to take more homes to be added to the total that we were going to build in this borough. And the only way that that could be done was to erode the green belt. Whether we like it or not, this particular field or area here has been taken away out of the green belt. Therefore, the principle of development is there. It is part of the settled community of Godalming and can be built upon. That is not a valid reason to reject this application. Whether we like that or not, that is true. Councillor Follows talks about prematurity. That's a rehearsed argument, and that is being dealt with on page 14 and 15 of this officer report. That's not a valid reason for objection. Councillor Follows also talks about SIL and how he'd much rather us turn every application down until after April the 1st deadline so that we can take advantage of SIL. I just would remind him that he himself voted against the local plan, so had we all followed his lead at that time, it would be a long time before we ever got to SIL as a result. So there is yes, April the 1st is there, but beyond that, of course, we will be getting applications subject to SIL. There is a deadline. We can't change that. And then, well, let's not do it at this time. It doesn't sound to me like a planning like a reason for turning down a planning application. So, looking at all of the objections, I have to say I am very sympathetic with all of them. And I would, in my heart, much rather follow that than the way I will follow, which is to follow my head. And I will, with some reluctance, be supporting the officer's recommendation to approve. Thank you.
Councillor Follows.
Thank you. It's extremely interesting, particularly Councillor Hunter's comments regarding prematurity, supporting it in this instance in Binscombe for 21 houses, but absolutely saying nothing on the subject for 260 houses in Erin's Hill last week. The inspector required these modifications. We're told in Guildford that's happened as well, except they have done what many of us wanted Waverley to do and stand up to those objections, to those additions.
Councillor Follows, can we speak to the application, not play to the gallery, please?
Indeed.
Thank you.
Back to the ONS figures then regarding the need. I do believe that the actual need has not actually been demonstrated for this application. I know that we're going to be drifting back to the local plan here, but I think the figures being based on the 2014 figures rather than 2016, I do not think we need this housing in Godalming. Could we just discuss, hopefully as a group, but also from officers, why we actually need this housing in terms of Godalming's housing numbers, and where are we in terms of meeting Godalming's contribution to the local plan as is? Thank you.
I don't think it's our place to repeat the local plan part 1, but officers, would you like to respond?
I think really it's not a case at the moment. This is not a case of whether you need to weigh up whether the council can demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply in respect of understanding whether sort of like the tilted balance applies. It's permission this is because the presumption of favour of sustainable development has already applies in the developed area. And because this is not a countryside site or one that is otherwise constrained in planning policy terms, so basically because it's in the developed area, the tilted balance doesn't apply. Presumption is in favour of development. And unfortunately, that's the situation we're in for this particular site, I'm afraid.
Councillor James.
Thank you, Chairman. Rather like Councillor Follows, I refer to last week, and we had the same thing, and I said I felt sympathy. I live in a little village and we've got to put 100 and the whole of my village has been taken out of the green belt apart from the little conservation area, so I should probably have 100 houses right by me and I'm a listed building. But I can't object to that because it's not a policy, it's in the local plan. I think the one advantage of this one, and if you could put up the little the green plan of the area, that one, I have to say, I've only been at Waverley for just under the 4 years, and I was at East Hampshire for 15 before that. I think that's one of the, I couldn't see where the density was, but looking at that, it's probably the greenest country design I've seen sitting here in the last 4 years. And then when the applicant actually said that actually they've gone from 35 houses down to 21, I'm absolutely amazed that an applicant has actually done that without us telling them that it's overdeveloped, the density is too high. Whilst I do sympathise that nobody wants dwellings in their little rural areas, there are no policy reasons that I can justify in refusing this. And as it says in our little thing, anything over 10 houses is a major application. And I cannot see any inspector not allowing this to go ahead when the site has been removed from the green belt and it is there for development. And I'm really, really sorry, but I will be supporting the officers. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you. Like you, Councillor James, my village has all been taken completely out of the green belt. But I did grow up in Godalming, and I remember when most of Binscombe was green fields, and probably a lot of the objectors live in houses that were green fields when I was a kid. But I have always viewed this site and that strip along the road as the last buffer between the housing and the countryside, and I think it would be a great shame to see that covered in houses. Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chairman. Can we just go back to that plan that Councillor James was speaking to? That one. There are certain patches of green coloured on the diagram. What's going to happen to them, or who owns them? The patch I'm particularly thinking of is on the road that comes in from Binscombe Lane, just to the north, up on the left. It seems to be ideal. A bit further in. That's it. Just up. That is then. Who owns it? Why are there no houses?
I think that's to be the proposed village green in the children's play area.
Anybody else like to comment, or shall I move to the recommendation? Right. So the recommendation is that, where are we? I've got to find the application now. Right, subject to the agreement of the appropriate legal agreement within 6 months of committee resolution, conditions 2 to 8, 10 to 16 and 18 to 26 set out in the agenda report, and amended conditions 1, 9 and 17 as set out on the update sheet, as well as informatives 1 to 17, permission be granted. All those in favour, please.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
And those against?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Chairman.
Oh joy, that gives me the casting vote, doesn't it? In that case, I will stick to my original decision and vote against. So that application has failed. Would the local ward councillors like to put forward reasons or propose refusal and then come up with reasons for refusal, please?
May I first propose, please, that this application be denied, refused?
Yeah.
No, the first one.
No, we have to have the proposal first, then we go to the grounds.
First.
Councillor Hunter, are you seconding that? Yeah. Right. Would you like to propose some grounds, please?
I can try. I'm gonna need the help of our officers. The main thing is the access and actually being on that road at all. If it had come onto Copside, I wouldn't have objected. But that is a very nasty piece of road there. So I don't know how you're going to word that, but I know Surrey County Council haven't, but half the time they don't even come down and have a look.
I've lost several wing mirrors there.
I think members need to be aware that obviously Surrey County Council haven't objected to the proposed access on grounds of highway safety or operation of the highway, and therefore I think we'd find it very difficult to be able to substantiate a reason for refusal for that at appeal.
If I may, is there not a reason regarding the proximity to the conservation area that would qualify?
That's the next thing, because that's one of on your. Sorry, that was on your right-hand side, proximity to the heritage site. Would you like to... Can you stick your judgmental things up,
I think potentially then members could consider that the public benefits of the proposal wouldn't outweigh the harm to the conservation area and the heritage assets. That's potentially something that members might be able to put forward if they feel that they want to go down that route, yes.
Would you be kind enough to put that slide up, please, when you've got your judgmental and matters against that's it? Yeah, thank you. I think bearing in mind the matters of judgment, the heritage considerations is the main one. Unfortunately, people reckon that the flooding and drainage is okay, but we are very concerned about that, even so.
Again, sorry, I just have to comment on that. The lead local flood authority didn't raise an objection as our professional body who would comment on that, and the SUDs put forward have been considered to be acceptable subject to condition. Again, I think it would be very, very difficult for officers to be able to defend something like that at committee.
You need to look at local knowledge.
Beg your pardon, appeal, sorry.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, we always say with people objecting, if you have one decent reason, it's better than having a waffle. May we go with the heritage considerations, please, unless someone can help us with anything else.
And also the reasons for including recommendation B would be automatically included. Any further comments on reasons for refusal? So, proposed by Councillor Wheatley and seconded by Councillor Hunter, the revised recommendation is that this application be refused for the reasons of the public benefit not outweighing the harm to heritage. Are we including access? And at the highways concerns, and where's recommendation B? The absence of an appropriate legal agreement. Yes, Beth. Do members want access included? The officer's recommendation is that we wouldn't be able to support it. Lewis.
Just a quick comment. If members are looking to rely on reasons to refuse this application which aren't backed up by evidence from the relevant consultees, they will run the risk of a costs award being made against us in the event an appeal is lodged. And so that's the risk that you have to consider in relying on those sorts of reasons.
Well, the committee have voted to refuse the application, so
no, I appreciate that.
We're not going to go back on that, I don't think.
No, I appreciate that, Chairman. I'm talking in relation to the highways reasons to refuse the access.
Councillor Follows.
It must be just on those heritage considerations. I'm sure it is the only thing whatsoever we have grounds to object. I'm sure that seems to be what the officers are saying as well.
You don't wish to include prematurity then?
I would love to include prematurity, but I'm sure the majority of this chamber won't allow me to do that. So,
Mr. Chairman, I think it is safest if you're likely to have inspectors who sort of are predisposed to allow developments anyway. I think we have to go with one main objection, which is care of the heritage around.
So the revised recommendation is that this application be refused on the basis of the public benefit not outweighing the harm to heritage, and also the absence of an appropriate legal agreement. All those in favour?
6, Chairman.
And those against?
4.
Right. So that is carried. Officers, do we still need to go through, we don't need to go through recommendation B. Recommendation C? No, I don't think so. Okay, so we move on to the next application. I'm sure some of the members in the public gallery would like to leave the room. Right, so members, we move on to item B1. Our reference WA 2018-1550, land at 62 Eashing Lane, Godalming, GU72LF. And the proposal is that an application under Regulation 3 of the Town and Country Planning General Regulations 1992 for construction of a new parking area, access path and associated works, as amended by plans received 21st of December 2018. And Jessica is going to introduce this application. Jess.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, this is an application under Regulation 3 of the Town and Country Planning Act because Waverley Borough Council are the applicant. So the site is located north of Eashing Lane and to the west of Arons Hill, and is within the developed area of Godalming. It's an aerial view of the site, as you can see. There's one mature tree located to the north of the site, kind of northeast of the site, and the boundary has now been amended to remove that from it. So the application is for the provision of 11 number off-street parking spaces and a new access onto Eashing Lane to be created with an access path linking to the existing path in front of dwellings 63, 62 and 64. The access is proposed to Eashing Lane, adjacent to the existing table to the west. Yep. These are some photos of the site. It's currently used as a bit of an informal area for parking, but it is considered green verge amenity space adjacent to the roads. So the determining issues are principal development, loss of agricultural land, highway safety, impact on trees, and then the matters of judgment are impact on design and visual amenity and impact on residential amenity. The County Highway Authority has undertaken an assessment of the site in terms of the likely net additional traffic generation, access arrangements and parking provision. It's certified that the application would not have a severe impact on the safety and operation of the adjoining public highway, subject to conditions to secure access and the construction management plan associated with the works on the site. The impact on trees is considered. There's a tree of high visual and high amenity value and therefore worthy of attention as identified on the site plan before. Revised plans and specifications have been received, as noted by the Chair, on the 21st of December last year, which have included a confinement system and sub-basic ground level of permeable finish to secure that the tree protection area is sufficiently mitigated from harm. It's considered that the layout respects the limitation of the site and uses the appropriate mitigation techniques, leaves sufficient space around the existing tree rooting area, and is subject to condition 4 to enforce that. It's considered that there would be limited to no impact on the residential amenities of the inhabitants of the properties to the north of the site as a result of the development, and the visual amenity of the area would not be compromised to a detrimental level. The application is granted for approval, or recommended for approval, sorry, and yeah, that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jess. Before I hand over to members, I drive past this patch most days, and the people in the houses adjacent to it have to park somewhere, and it's either a muddy patch or a dry, sandy patch. And I think if we can regularise the parking, it'll tidy up that little corner there. But I'll pass over to you, members, for your comments. Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to refer to one of the central paragraphs on page 47, where officers say it is unlikely to result in an unacceptable impact to the visual amenity. I would say to the contrary, that it is likely to result in an acceptable impact to the visual amenity, given especially the comments that you, Mr. Chairman, have already made. It's a bit of a mud bath in the wet season.
Councillor Follows.
Yeah, I share those sentiments. It is used as an impromptu car park almost all the time. Having it regularised, I think, is particularly needed. Maintaining the tree there just adds to that being a reasonable way to do it. I personally no objections to this. Considering the amount of parking spaces that are needed actually on that area as well, I think actually it will be beneficial. Thank you.
Yes, the provision of car parking for residents is a very good thing. We've had that done at Milford, but unfortunately outsiders are using it as a general parking area, leaving their vehicles abandoned there, which we're having difficulty meeting. How are we going to police this area for the same reason?
I actually know one of the residents there, and I'm pretty sure he'll police his own little area.
Well, we rely on the residents in Melford to tell us as well. But that I'm all for providing off-street parking. I noticed that there was still parking on the road, even though they've got a muddy strip to park on. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Bolton, then Councillor Marr.
Can I just clarify with officers, the land is owned by the council, isn't it? So we can dispose of items on that land if we wish. Thank you.
I was thinking perhaps your friend would also police it and stop people using it as a rat run to Elsted.
Jolly good. Which is that subject to conditions 1 to 4 and informatives 1 to 4, permission be granted. All those in favour?
It's unanimous, Chairman.
Jolly good. That's passed. So we'll now move on to item B2, which is our reference WA 2018-1615, Beach Knoll, Markway, Godalming, GU7 2BW, and the proposal is the erection of extensions and alterations as amended by plan submitted on the 19th of the 11th, 2018, and once again Jessica is going to introduce the application.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, so this is an application for the extension and alteration of an existing dwelling house within the site known as Beach Knoll. The application site measures approximately 0.21 hectares and is within the developed area of Godalming. Oh no, it's not, sorry. Wrong paragraph, my apologies. The area is residential in character. The existing dwelling is currently being complete and replaces a previous dwelling which was on the site. The proposal comprises the erection and extension of to the western side of the existing property, the erection of a porch and the erection of a rear extension. Revised plans have been submitted and accepted to remove the proposed alterations to the front gates and boundary treatment. These will now remain as existing and therefore do not form part of the assessment of this application. So this is an aerial view of the site. You can see that the dwelling is currently being constructed within this area. And this is the block plan. So these are the existing plans as permitted in the 2016 application for the replacement of the dwelling. And these are the existing elevations. These are the proposed plans. So as you can see here, the extension to the side is located on this part of the site, so about here. And then there's the front porch extension and the rear extension here. And these are the proposed plans. You can see the extension just formalises and makes the property kind of an symmetrical addition. The front elevation is extended to make it slightly higher but still sit below the ridge height. The rear is extended to the back with the bottom part of the extension open, the top part partially filled, and then a balcony to the rear. This is the gates there. They're just to be replaced as is. There's no change from the existing here. These are some photos of the existing site. This is where the extension will go. And this is kind of the existing materials. The materials are to match of the proposed, the existing dwelling. As you can see, the kind of boundaries to the rear of the site are mature trees, and then there's fencing and trees to each side. So the determining issues of the application, the impact on the greenbelt, effects on the SPAs, biodiversity regulations, impact on the visual amenity of the landscape, and impact on the residential amenity. With regard to the greenbelt, the proposed extension would extend the original dwelling house by an additional 102.02 square metres, which would represent a percentage increase of 28% of the original dwelling size. Floor area, that is. Officers consider that the extensions cumulatively, that's the front extension, rear extension, and the proposed side extension, would not cumulatively result in a disproportionate addition to the main dwelling house, nor would they result in an increased floor area above and beyond what is considered acceptable in the greenbelt. Therefore, officers don't have any concerns regarding the impact of the greenbelt disproportionate. The site is also located in an area of great landscape value. and officers considered that the development is unlikely to cause a detrimental impact to the AGLV, as the main dwelling house has been established and the alterations are proportionate and well contained within the site. Officers consider that the impact on residential amenity would not be so severe as to detrimentally harm the amenities of the neighbouring properties. There's sufficient gap retained either side of the dwelling house and to the rear and front. However, officers do consider that if the application was to be approved, that a condition should be attached to include a condition should be included to ensure that a privacy screen is erected to the side of the balcony prior to its first use and permanently retained thereafter to ensure the residential amenities in the neighbouring property are protected. But yeah, all other nearby properties officers considered are of a sufficient distance away to alleviate the potential for material impact to be caused to their residential amenity. Impact on trees, the existing boundary treatment to the front, the post and rail fence and the existing hedge are to be retained. Officers considered that that would mitigate the overall impact to that part of the site. There's trees to the left of the property where the extension is to be extended, where the property is to be extended, and officers considered that the proposed landscaping plan, along with replacement and retained trees, hedgerows and other planting, would be acceptable to comply with the policy in regard to trees. With regard to the effect on the Wilden Heath SPA1, it's considered that there would not be a likely increase in the amount of people using the site, and therefore the integrity of the SPA would be retained. Therefore, officers recommended that the application is granted, recommended for approval. Thanks.
Thank you. Members, Councillor James.
Thank you, Chairman. I have to say, if I was building this house or wanting to buy it, it's lopsided as it is at the moment. And the word, somebody said it was disproportionate. Well, if you take the sort of proportion bit or part of that word, actually it enhances the building because it is, I can't believe it was originally designed like that, or whoever allowed it on design allowed it to be designed like that. It does need the bit on the left-hand side, and the original house the original design replacement was only 10% bigger than the original one, plus 28%, 38% in my maths, and it's still below the 40% that we allow. So whoever has this house, either they've got something wrong with their eyes like I have, or it does need to be enhanced. Honestly, it's one of, we've got architects and things, and which architect allowed it to be built like that to start with? So if the applicant's sitting there...
Don't look at me.
If the applicant's sitting there, honestly, it's a beautiful house. It looks like the front of Petworth House, and if that was lopsided, we'd all be saying, gosh, how did they build it then like that? Or a small Buckingham Palace. But regardless, it's a beautiful house, and it needs to have it. So literally on design alone, it must have it. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chairman. I quite agree with my fellow Councillor James that the existing house at the moment looks unattractive because it's asymmetric, and the proposed design will be more attractive, particularly because it's symmetric. But I would like to just investigate briefly the recent planning history. My understanding is that the first application, this is page 60, my understanding from the local ward councillors with whom I have discussed this is that the application 1946 was there to replace the house built in 2006 or approved in 2006. And the 1946 house in 2016 was larger than the house it replaced. I think the council officers may have given this away, that it is currently being constructed, because the house as it stands is not really habitable. We can see that from the pictures. although I understand that the building control people have said, well, it's got a cover of plastic and it's waterproof, it's not really habitable. And we now have this application which is proposing an extension to this house which is not really habitable. And the net effect of all this is, I think, to somewhat break the rules, because we've had 2 bites of this, and we've ended up with, yes, a very attractive house, but it is significantly larger than the house the totality is replacing. And I think this isn't quite right. I think we're bending rules. I'd like officers to consider that.
If that's true, Councillor Bolton, I've bent the rules many, many times, because if you demolish and rebuild, you're allowed, our RD2A suggests that you can go 10% higher than what was there, larger than what was there. But then, once the house is finished, you could have 40% of that 110%. So as Councillor James pointed out, by the time this is, it may be larger now, by the time it's got this extension, it's still going to be less than 40%, whereas they could go 45%.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, but I won't repeat what you said about bending the rules. I think
I was saying if that was true, I didn't say I had bent the rules.
My submission, I think, is that if the planning application in 2016 was not for the intermediary house, which is not finished, if it was for the final house, the applicant would not have got permission because it was so much larger than the house it's replacing. And they've had 2 bites of the cherry and bending the rules.
Comments, officers?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Bolton, turning first to your comment that it doesn't lived in, it doesn't finished. What we're looking for is substantial completion. That's the test. If it is watertight and building control have signed it off, then that is our test. Yeah. So I just wanted to clarify that. Now, the interaction between RD2A and RD2. So RD2A allows you to build a house that is 10% bigger than that which stood there before. Guidelines. Yes. Once that house is built, then RD2 kicks in. We're not going back to 1968. We're looking at what is the house when it was built. And so, yes, technically speaking, this can happen, but I wouldn't agree that it's bending the rules. It was clarified many years ago. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Bolton, do you wish to come back, or are you happy with that? And don't accuse me of bending the rules.
I think that the council rules, and I think this is for another forum, I think the council rules should be looked at again, and I'd ask officers to do this. At the moment, I just do not think that that house is complete, particularly if we could have a look at the aerial view, the photograph. Remember, it's the one in the middle. Who on earth would live on a building site like that?
When was that photograph taken? That's probably the pertinent question. Shall we move on, or do you wish to answer that? Councillor Follows.
Thank you. Yes, actually, I just had a very similar question about the reason why it was brought in by the ward member. So, is that the reason why the member for Charlestown's brought it in? Yeah. Yeah, it's a shame that they're not here to explain that, because I think that would have. One of them is. Yeah. Anyway, otherwise, though, I am compelled by a sense of need for symmetry, as Councillor James has said, that this must be passed. Yes.
Councillor Martin.
I just wonder whether we might be tempted to remove from permitted development as a part of the conditions.
That's a thought for the officers. Councillor Holder.
Thank you, Chairman. I tend to agree with Councillor Bolton. If the developer wished to build a house that had symmetry, he would have built it like that in the first place. I think this is an example, and we've had several examples in the last 6 months, where a developer puts in the plans, gets approval, and then immediately puts in for a second application to enlarge his first application. I think this is overdevelopment. I agree with Councillor James that it does add symmetry, but the developer realised that when he put the first plans in, that he was going to build a house that wasn't symmetrical. So I think this is a dangerous precedent if we're going to allow developers to increase and constantly increase their applications. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barr.
Well, on your last comment, Councillor Holder, this has been happening for many, many years. Exactly, the architects and the applicants understand the system, and they work it in the same way as people understand the tax system and find ways of not paying tax in a legal manner. In Bramley, for instance, some years ago, we had a situation where somebody did exactly this, but wanted to go up above their 10% increase by 41%. They were refused, and they had to draw back on that. But it was legally possible to go to the 40%, even though they actually hadn't, in that case, they actually hadn't completed to a watertight state. So we allowed that to happen. But in this case, I think probably the aerial photograph is out of date. But perhaps I'm wrong. Now, but the other point I wanted to make was that we talked about trees, and I wasn't quite clear whether we covered all the trees. On the photograph you had of the side of the property where the extension is due to go, it looked like the tree there was going to be hazarded by the extension and the groundworks done by that. Have we got a reasonable protection statement on that, so that that tree itself is maintained, presuming that it's, well, of course, it probably isn't protected anyway, but it would seem that that is a requirement to maintain the trees, and therefore, how do they protect the root structure of that particular tree? Has that been considered?
Sorry, Councillor, we're just having a quick look at the report. It looks like the tree and landscaping officer didn't have any sort of objection to any loss of any trees as part of the site, and therefore hasn't recommended any sort of condition to protect the tree. I mean, the landscaping plan shows it to be retained, but there's nothing there to condition to ensure that it's retained. So even though it's shown, I'm guessing that the tree and landscape officer had no real objection to its loss if that was going to ultimately be a result of the proposal.
One thing missing, of course, is flagpoles at the front of the building, isn't it?
It's just one thing. On those photographs with the scaffolding, I don't know whether the one on the right-hand side, if that one bottom right, if it's the back of the house, or if it's the front of the house, because I can assure you on the plans I've got here, there should be a window where that brick is underneath the upstairs window. Either it has one French window in the middle of those two, or it has one window underneath the one on the right-hand side. So I suggest building control go and look, because it's not been built according to the plans I've got in front of me. Thank you, Chairman.
I think you find that they've hoped that they might gain approval this evening and built it in accordance with that little portion in the corner, in accordance with the proposed plans. Councillor Bolton, you wish to?
Thank you. It's just a separate issue. Can officers confirm that once the extension is built, if it is built, there is adequate space between the extended dwelling and the neighbour?
Yes, I know that Jessica has got those figures. So. You showed it to me at Chairman's briefing, didn't you? Didn't you have dimensions from one house to the other? So, yeah, go.
So they're addressed on pages 65 to 66 of the officer's report, and outlined that there's sufficient, so 8 metres separation. 15 minutes, is that right?
Councillor Follows.
Extraordinarily
Final point?
quick, absolutely. The rules that were being bent that alluded to by Councillors Holder and Bolton and yourself slightly, are these things within Waverley's power to modify? Because otherwise, my query there relates to the fact that if you know about it and it's there and it's been going on for a while, why haven't you done anything about it collectively?
If I can just add to this discussion, there are historic cases of applications that have gone to appeal where they have gone there, said we want to knock this down and build 10% larger, but then once it's finished we can add another 40%, so can we have it 50% larger? And they have won on appeal. So it is there. That is bending the rules. So the tack that the officers take is build the thing first at 10% and then come back, and we will consider it separately as a separate planning application. Well, because these things aren't set in stone, they're not automatically allowed 40%. It's down to mass and bulk and effect on neighbours, etc., etc. So just, yeah. Right, let's move to the recommendation. Where are we? Yes. That's subject to amended condition 1 on the update sheet and conditions 2 to 3 set out in the agenda report. Permission be granted. All those in favour? And against? 2. That application is approved. I will wish you good night and hand over to my learned friend alongside me. Thank you, Amy, for your help as ever.
Thank you. Can we move to the last item on the last agenda item on the paper, which is item B3, WA 2018/1807, Step Cottage 26, Shady Hanger, Godalming, GU7 2HR. Proposal application under section 75 to vary condition 1 of a previous approval. Gemma, would you like to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sure members won't mind if I speed through this one. The application site is located to the northwest of Shady Hanger and measures 0.47 hectares and features a detached bungalow with a sloping front amenity space. There's an aerial photograph of the site there for you, just to get an idea of context. The proposal is sought, planning permission is sought to vary condition 1 of a previous planning application that was approved on the site for the erection of an extension and carport. The variation is to the condition number 1, which is the plans condition, and is to accommodate a 0.6 metre height increase to the proposed extension. So this is the existing elevations at the moment on the site. You'll note there's an outbuilding there at the moment, and this is the main bungalow, and that's the existing floor plans, so the annex there. And what is currently being approved on site under the previous planning application, WA 20180369, and that's the currently approved floor plans. As you can see, there's a link there and the building's been extended. And these are the proposed elevations. So this is the element here. And if you want more technical details in terms of what's being proposed, it's the previously approved building is proposed to be cut into the bank further than the building now proposed, and therefore the building is set 0.6 metres higher, with the lower section increased in height by the same amount to ensure the internal floor level is not substantially different. The proposed carport is no different to that approved under the previous planning application. And there's the proposed floor plans. Some photographs of the site, just showing you the existing situation. And you can see the matters of principal and technical opinion on the left of the site, the principle of development, having regard to the previous planning permission already granted on the site. The impact on the trees, having consideration that none of the trees or vegetarians potentially affected are of a formal size that are considered significant value to warrant any sort of conditions or reasons for refusal for the application. Moving on to matters of judgment, design and impact on visual amenity, again having regard to the previous planning permission that could be implemented on site, and impact on visual amenity in that the proposed annex extension, again, previous planning permission didn't raise any concerns in terms of impact to neighbouring amenities and the minor proposal, the minor implications of this, again, officers are quite satisfied that there will be no impact on residential amenity. Officers are therefore recommending that permission be granted subject to the conditions set out on page 83 of the agenda. Of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I have got one observation, and that is presumably that the land has been dug out, so that so if it's been dug out, why hasn't it been dug out low enough so that the second half matches the first half? I don't understand why it's only been half dug out. It's most extraordinary. Of all my 12 years as a councillor, I'd never seen an application like this. It looks as if it's two halves of a house that have been joined together at a peculiar angle. It looks most peculiar. I can't understand how anybody can produce an application like that. It's most odd.
I have to agree that it looks as if you've got two pieces of paper and haven't lined them up properly when you printed them. Is there any other question before we move to the recommendation? So the recommendation is that subject to conditions 1 to 3 and informative 1, permission be granted. You have a show of hands of who agree with that. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. We have no other further items on the agenda, no legal business, etc. So that concludes the meeting. Thank you very much.